Every gardener knows that the moment spring arrives, a silent but fierce battle begins. For decades, my backyard was a battleground, and I was losing. Every single year, like clockwork, the tender green shoots of my berry bushes and fruit trees would be smothered in dense, sticky colonies of aphids. And right there with them, marching in endless military precision up and down the trunks, were the ants. I spent small fortunes on chemical sprays, drenching my soil and crops in toxic powders, only to find the pests back a week later. It felt like an endless, exhausting loop. Exactly 10 years ago, I decided enough was enough. I realized that if I kept doing the same thing, I would just ruin my health and my soil without ever truly solving the problem. I put down the chemical bottles, sat down in my garden, and began to closely observe how these pests interact with nature and each other. What I discovered completely transformed my approach to gardening. For the past 10 years, my garden has been completely free of aphid infestations and ant damage. Today, I want to share my comprehensive, time-tested strategy with you. The clever secrets that commercial companies won't tell you because they want you to keep buying their expensive, short-term chemical fixes. The first line of defense, currant bush troubles, and the power of soap. When spring rolls around, everything looks beautiful. But the changing weather brings hidden dangers. Even when the days are still quite chilly and you think it is too early for insects to be active, aphids are already waking up. They are incredibly resilient to early spring cold snaps. The moment the first juicy, vulnerable young leaves begin to unfurl on your bushes, the aphids are right there waiting to strike. In my experience, blackcurrant bushes are always the absolute first target. For some strange reason, red currants don't attract them nearly as much. But blackcurrants are like a five-star restaurant for these tiny parasites. If you lose your vigilance for even a few days, the tips of the young branches will begin to curl up in an ugly, distorted way. If you open up one of those crumpled leaves and look underneath, you will see a horrifying sight. Hundreds of tiny, soft-bodied green or gray insects sucking the literal lifeblood out of your plants. Instead of rushing to buy heavy chemical poisons, my absolute go-to weapon is a humble bar of soap. But forget about heavily perfumed modern toilet soaps. What you need is traditional, old-fashioned laundry soap. Or, even better, tar soap infused with natural birch tar. Tar soap is incredibly effective because it possesses a very strong, distinct, smoky aroma. This heavy, pungent smell lingers on the bushes for a long time, and aphids, along with many other flying and crawling garden pests, absolutely detest it. Here is exactly how I prepare my protective solution. Grate about 100 grams of a solid bar of laundry or tar soap into fine shavings. Alternatively, you can use 100 milliliters of liquid laundry or liquid tar soap, which saves you the trouble of grating. Dissolve this soap thoroughly in a standard 10-liter bucket of warm water until there are no clumps left and the liquid is completely uniform. Pour the mixture into your garden sprayer and head out to the garden. There is a massive secret to applying this successfully, which most amateur gardeners completely miss. If you just walk around waving the sprayer and coating the tops of the bushes, you are wasting your time. The aphids are hiding safely underneath the leaves, using the leaf itself as a tiny umbrella to shield them from above. To make this work, you have to get down low, bend down under the branches, and point your spray nozzle upwards from the ground. You must completely drench the undersides of the leaves where the pest colony is concentrated. The science behind this is very simple yet brilliant. As the soapy water dries on the insects' bodies, it forms a microscopic, airtight, suffocating film. the aphids lose their ability to breathe and feed on the plant sap. They quickly weaken, die, and fall off the branches. It is completely eco-friendly, extraordinarily cheap, and highly effective. However, it does have one significant downside that you must always remember. Soap is highly water-soluble. If a heavy spring rainstorm hits your area, your protective barrier will be washed straight into the ground, meaning you will need to repeat the entire spraying process as soon as the weather clears up. The unbreakable bond. Why you cannot fight aphids alone. Even the most thorough soap treatments will only grant you a very temporary pause in the war if you commit the #1 mistake of backyard gardening: ignoring the ants. Years ago, I used to be completely baffled. I would carefully wash down all my currant bushes, leaving them perfectly clean, green, and vibrant. But a week later, the tips of the branches would be completely covered in aphids again. The answer was staring me right in the face, crawling around the base of the bushes. If you look closely at those curled leaves, you will see ants frantically scurrying back and forth among the aphids. They are not random travelers. They are highly organized farmers. Ants and aphids live in a sophisticated, centuries-old symbiotic relationship. Aphids excrete a sweet, sticky fluid called honeydew, which ants absolutely love to eat. To protect this invaluable food source, ants act as personal bodyguards. They will fight off predatory ladybugs, shield the aphids from bad weather, and most dangerously, physically carry the aphids to new, healthy, uninfected young shoots to expand their territory. This leads to the golden rule of my garden. If you start a war against aphids without touching the ants, you will achieve absolutely nothing in the long run. You can wipe out every single aphid on a branch today, but the ants living in the ground nearby will simply bring out a fresh batch of aphids from their underground nurseries tomorrow and replant them all over your bushes. You will find yourself trapped in an exhausting, endless cycle all summer long. Methods and tools for comprehensive garden protection. To help you navigate the various tools available for defending your garden against this duo, I have mapped out the most common methods, explaining exactly how they work, their active components, and the pros and cons of using them. Since this is a guide for practical application, let us break down each approach systematically. 1. Tar or laundry soap solution. Active component/base. Fatty acids, and natural birch tar. Target pests. Extremely effective against aphids, small caterpillars, and thrips. Key advantages. It is completely organic and environmentally safe. Leaves absolutely zero toxic residues on your future harvest. Repels pests with its powerful smoky scent, and costs pennies to make. Drawbacks and application notes. It washes away easily with the very first heavy rain, requiring you to monitor the weather and reapply the solution regularly throughout the early season. 2. Red ground hot pepper. Active component/base. Capsaicin, the natural chemical compound that gives peppers their intense heat. Target pests. Ants. Key advantages. It is completely safe for your soil quality and your plants, does not harm beneficial earthworms, and rapidly drives ants away from their nesting sites. Drawbacks and application notes. Its effect is highly localized, meaning it only protects the specific patch of ground where it is applied, and it must be regularly refreshed throughout the season as it settles into the earth. 3. Thick straw mulch. Active component/base. A dense, heavy layer of organic matter like straw, hay, or mowed grass. Target pests. Ants, indirectly. Key advantages. It locks deep moisture into the soil, suppressing weeds, and creates the perfect damp habitat to attract frogs, toads, and lizards. the absolute best natural predators of ants. Drawbacks and application notes. You must maintain a very thick layer and ensure that the mulch layer does not completely dry out. It needs to stay consistently damp underneath to keep the ant-eating predators happy and discourage ants from nesting. 4. Bovaria bioinsecticide, active component slash base, living spores of the predatory insect-killing fungus Bovaria. Target pests, aphids, whiteflies, and various destructive beetle larvae. Key advantages: it is completely non-toxic to your eventual harvest, safe for birds, and entirely harmless to vital pollinators like honeybees. It spreads naturally from insect to insect, like a biological chain reaction. Drawbacks and application notes. It requires specific weather conditions to function, only activating when air temperatures are consistently above plus 18 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, the living spores are easily destroyed by intense direct sunlight, meaning you must apply it during overcast days or late in the evening. It also requires patience, taking 1 to 2 weeks to show visible results. 5. Biotin chemical spray, active component slash base, imidacloprid, a highly potent systemic chemical insecticide. Target pests, all known species of aphids and leafhoppers. Key advantages: it is incredibly powerful, entering the plant's vascular system to kill pests within a few hours of feeding and protecting the entire plant from the inside out for weeks. Drawbacks and application notes. This is a harsh synthetic chemical. It is strictly forbidden to use it while a plant or tree is actively blooming, as it will devastate native bee populations, and it requires a strict waiting period before any fruit can be safely harvested. My secret weapon underfoot, the power of organic mulching. Let us talk about the internet's favorite topic: getting rid of ants. If you search online, you will find thousands of recipes. Some say you should mix equal parts boric acid with flour or powdered sugar and leave little bait traps under your bushes. This does work because the workers carry the poison back to feed the queen, destroying the colony. Others recommend chemical granules like brose or heavy-duty synthetic poisons like carbofuran or carbophos to burn out the entire ant hill. Personally, I stepped away from harsh chemical ant killers on my land a whole decade ago. Why? Because my garden is not an isolated bubble. It is surrounded by open wild fields and untamed neighboring plots. Wiping out every single anthill in a square mile is an impossible, exhausting task. If I drench a spot in chemicals today, a brand new colony from across the fence will simply march in tomorrow. Instead, I focused on local, natural defense, and my ultimate secret weapon is creating a thriving ecosystem using a thick layer of straw mulch. When people see my garden beds completely covered in thick straw, they often say, "How can you recommend that? Straw creates a dry roof and ants will swarm underneath it." And my answer is always the same: you are mulching completely wrong. Think about the basic biology of an ant. Where do they build their nests? They look for loose, dry, warm, sandy soil. Ants absolutely hate moisture. If the ground under your straw is bone dry, you have built them a perfect luxury home. In my garden, the soil under that golden straw blanket is always deeply wet, cool, and rich. I pile the straw high and keep it watered. No sensible ant will ever attempt to build an underground palace in muddy, damp soil because their eggs and larvae would immediately rot. Even better, this damp organic ecosystem attracts the ultimate free labor force: lizards, frogs, and toads. My garden is absolutely full of them. During the day, quick little green and brown lizards dart in and out of the straw, and at night, massive, hungry toads come out to hunt. Their absolute favorite snack in the world is ants and ant larvae. They patrol the base of my fruit trees and berry bushes 24 hours a day, keeping the ant population completely under control. By creating the right environment, nature takes care of the pests for me. And don't worry about slugs or snails under the straw. I routinely check deep under the mulch layers, and I never find them. Instead, the soil is packed with massive, healthy red earthworms. They spend their days eating the decaying bottom layer of the straw, turning it into rich, fertile black humus that feeds my plants with natural nitrogen. It is a perfect win-win situation. The invisible threat? Why aphids are a deadly danger. Some casual gardeners don't take aphids seriously. They see a few curled leaves on a plum tree or a currant bush and think, well, they are just sucking a little sap. The tree is big enough to survive. This is a massive, dangerous misunderstanding. If aphids only cause cosmetic leaf damage, I wouldn't waste my time fighting them so intensely. The real danger of aphids is that they act exactly like dirty, unsterilized medical needles. They are the primary carriers of incurable, fatal plant viruses. An aphid can feed on a diseased wild bush out in the fields, fly or be carried by an ant onto your prize garden crops, pierce the delicate skin of a young shoot, and infect your entire plant with a death sentence. This is incredibly visible with raspberries. Many gardeners have seen a raspberry bush suddenly stop growing normal fruit and start producing a massive, dense cluster of dozens of tiny, thin, broom-like shoots from its base. This is a devastating viral disease called raspberry bushy dwarf virus, or witch's broom. An infected bush will never produce a normal harvest again. The few berries it grows will be tiny, dry, and crumbly. Aphids are the ones responsible for spreading this virus across your garden. If you ever see a raspberry bush or a currant bush displaying clear signs of a viral infection, do not waste your time or money trying to cure it. Plant viruses cannot be treated by any chemical or biological product on Earth. The only correct solution is to take a sharp shovel, dig up the entire root ball, carry it far away from your garden, and burn it completely. If you leave it out of pity, aphids will spread the virus to your entire patch within weeks. I recently had to cut down and dig up an old blackcurrant bush that caught a viral disease called reversion, spread by mites. It is heartbreaking, but keeping your garden safe requires absolute vigilance and tough decisions. Deploying biological warfare correctly. Since I avoid harsh chemicals, I rely heavily on biological treatments. But I notice that many gardeners use them completely wrong and then complain online that biologicals don't work. One of the best bioinsecticides against aphids is based on a predatory insect-killing fungus called Bovaria. When the microscopic spores of this fungus come into contact with an aphid, they germinate right through its skin, killing it from the inside and spreading to neighboring insects like a wild biological chain reaction. But for this living weapon to work, you must respect 3 strict rules. First, temperature is everything. Because it is a living organism, the Bovaria fungus can only grow and hunt when the air temperature is consistently above plus 18 degrees Celsius. If you spray your plants during a cold, rainy spring week when it is only plus 12 degrees Celsius, the fungus will remain completely dormant, the aphids will survive, and you will have wasted your money. Second, protect it from the sun. Direct ultraviolet sunlight kills beneficial fungi and bacteria almost instantly. If you mix your biological spray and apply it at noon under a blazing sun, the UV rays will fry the spores before they can even attach to the pests. Always spray late in the evening at sunset, or choose warm, completely overcast days. Third, adjust your expectations. Chemical poisons kill insects instantly, showing a clean bush within hours. Biological treatments do not work that way. The infection takes time to spread through the colony. You won't see a dramatic change the next morning. It takes a week, sometimes two, for the population to completely collapse, but the results are highly sustainable and completely non-toxic. Knowing when to use chemistry. A practical example. While I love organic gardening, I am not a hypocrite. There are rare, critical moments in a gardener's life where a targeted chemical application is the only way to save a valuable plant. The key is knowing how to use it safely and responsibly. Take my young plum tree, a wonderful variety called Niemanskaya. It is still very young and only bearing its first real crops, so I want to protect every single piece of fruit for my family. Just yesterday, I noticed that aphids were starting to attack the tips of its young branches, causing them to curl up tightly. The tree has completely finished blooming, and tiny green baby plums have already formed on the branches. In this specific scenario, I chose to treat the tree with a potent, systemic chemical insecticide called biotin. I did this for two very specific reasons. First, the time until harvest is immense, at least 2 to 3 months away. Over this long period, the systemic chemical inside the tree's tissues will completely break down into totally safe, harmless basic elements, leaving zero chemical residues in the ripe fruit. Second, and most importantly, the tree is no longer blooming. Never under any circumstances should you use a chemical insecticide on a tree that is actively flowering. If you do, you will slaughter the honeybees and wild pollinators that arrive to help your garden. Since my plum tree is done blooming, the bees are long gone, and there is absolutely zero danger to our essential pollinator friends. By contrast, I never spray my massive mature apple trees with anything at all. They are giant, incredibly strong, and produce hundreds of pounds of fruit. If aphids ruin a few leaves at the very top of a 50-foot tree, it doesn't matter. There are plenty of apples for my family, plenty for our friends, and enough for nature to take a small share. Balance is key, behind the scenes of a modern garden life. I have to tell you, keeping up with a beautiful garden and sharing these tips takes a lot of energy. This morning, I dragged myself out of bed at 5 o'clock as soon as the first light hit the windows. I barely slept because the local weather stations have been warning us about sudden late spring ground frosts all week. I spent my morning running around the dew-soaked grass in my rubber boots, frantically checking my tomato greenhouses and young grapevines to make sure nothing froze. Thankfully, everything survived, but I am absolutely exhausted, and filming content out in the elements is always an adventure. We will be right in the middle of recording a serious segment about tar soap. The sun is blinding us. The wind is howling into the microphone. And suddenly, a wild sparrow bursts out of a nearby bush right over my head, making me jump half out of my skin. We just have to laugh, reset the camera, and start all over again. Then there are the endless debates with product manufacturers. They will release an excellent fertilizer or pest control product, but give it some bizarre, unpronounceable commercial name. Then I get flooded with messages from viewers saying, "Why are you using a product with such a silly name?" And I have to tell them, my dear friends, I didn't name the product. I. I am just reading the label out loud exactly as the factory printed it. But at the end of the day, seeing a clean, vibrant, thriving garden makes every single early morning and insect battle completely worth it. Conclusion: achieving your own pest-free paradise. Regaining control of your backyard without turning it into a toxic chemical waste dump is entirely possible. By understanding how ants and aphids work together, using traditional tar soap to suffocate early outbreaks, maintaining a thick, damp layer of straw mulch to recruit natural predators like frogs and lizards, and deploying biological tools correctly, you can achieve a perfect balance. Keep a close eye on your plants, protect your young trees, and don't let a small aphid problem turn into a viral outbreak. Thank you so much for following my journey and supporting my work. Here is to a healthy, abundant, and beautiful harvest for us all.